Continuing on here, 276, we have the idea of default arguments. This is 6.2, or no, it isn't. It's 6.12. So congratulations. We are, what, 3/4 of the way through the chapter. And it starts on 351. The idea here is that there are some times where we have function calls that we want to specify data will be present even if we don't have data to pass to it. So think of default arguments in the same way we think of default applications when we're using our Windows or our Macs or our Android phones or our iOS devices. Like if you fire up a Windows PC for the first time and you hit an email link, it will open the default Windows 11 Outlook mail app, the really crappy one that nobody uses. If I'm here on my Macs and I do the same thing, it opens up Mail by default. Sometimes that's okay, and sometimes we want to be able to change that, right? So if I'm running my Mac for a very long time and I have Outlook, let's say, for example, installed so I can do enterprise mail, so Rock Valley College stuff, I want to be able to click on an email link and have Outlook open instead of Apple Mail. So I can usurp, I can take precedent over that if I want to, but just in case I have a default value there. Here in the textbook, we refer to, what happens if you want to do a little bit of math, but you want to make sure that you never try to divide by 0. Well, great, we can do that. If I specify that the divisor is 1 instead of uninitialized or 0, I can do that with a default argument. So there's a couple of things that you should know about default arguments. Number one is they should be stated in the function's description as soon as possible. What that means is if you are using function prototype, so remember in a function prototype, the stub of that goes above main. So that way in the precompile time environment, C++ knows, okay, I'm going to get references to this function name and it is going to have these parameters along with it. But at that time you do not have to have the function body that accompanies it. That will go later on after your code for main. So here in the function definition, what we would do is add our default arguments. So you can see them behind me here. And again, this is on page 351. In my void function for show area, you can see that I have, and again, this would be just a function prototype, so not the full function definition. We are telling C++ via the precompile time environment and during compile time that, hey, you are going to get references to a function called show area, and uninitialized, those are going to be, there's going to be a double value you'll use as a parameter, and its value is 20. There's going to be another double value you'll use as a parameter, and its value will be 10 in that case. And there you go. You'll notice we do not name those yet. So I didn't say, double length equals 20 or double width equals 10. I just said, be aware, there's going to be a double with a value and a double with a value. So later on, when we go for the rest of the function definition, you see that's the very next portion here on page 351. As we're actually defining the function, we would go through and say double length equals 20, and then double width equals 10. Fine, this is great, this is good, but what happens if during the run of our program, we either get all or some of the data that we actually want to pass here? Well, that turns out that that's okay too. So if we continue on, we're going to look at program 6-24. This is on page 352. You can see here on line number 6, we have our function prototype. So remember, no function body. We have void display area int equals 10, int equals 1. So those are the default parameters. If nothing is passed to display stars, woo, if nothing is passed to display stars, it has values. Here inside of main, we can see that we are going to call display stars 3 times. We've got one call to display stars that is empty. So there are no arguments being passed, which means that C++ will use the default parameters, the things that are there from the beginning. On line number 12, I pass one argument to display stars. So you can see it's there inside of the parens, it's the value 5. So what that 5 is going to do is it is going to take precedence over the length parameters value. And so on line number 12, when we call to display stars, what we're going to get is 5 and 1. Finally, on line number 14, I have 7 and 3 as my arguments that I'm going to pass to display stars. So the values of those parameters where we're calling, or so at the called function display stars, those are going to be 7 and 3 as opposed to 20, or no, my mistake, 10 and 1 or 5 and 1. So you can see we've got a lot of flexibility here in how it is that we can call our functions. We either can call them with, when we have default parameters, we can either call them with no arguments or incomplete arguments. I could also do this with display stars and then inside of my parens, just a comma and a 5. What that is going to do is provide values not for let me get you the right, not for int columns, but it will give me a value for int rows instead. So let's look at what the program output there would be. And again, this is on 353 in the textbook. So the first line of program output we can see back here someplace is we have columns and rows. So there is 10 stars for the columns and there's just one row of them because that's what we've passed over here. So the next function call on line number, let me go back for that one, 12 over here. The next function call, we pass a 5 as an argument. So that 5 overwrites the 10 for our columns, but rows is unchanged. So here you can see we have 5 stars, so that's 5 columns, but only one row of them. So our next function call here on line number 14 has 2 arguments. So this time there are no default arguments left. We are passing arguments, and the 7 and the 3 will be used as parameters. When we get here inside of our display, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as our rows, 1, 2, 3 as our columns. Default values are here overwritten by the arguments that we've passed over. There is video code walkthrough on this so you can see it again, but what it does is provide you as a developer with a lot of flexibility. You have created a function and you want that function to be able to run properly every time, but this gives you a bunch of leeway in how it is that you want to be able to call to that function. Do I pass it any arguments based on its parameters? Well, if I have default values, I don't have to worry about that. Do I have an incomplete set of data? Well, if I have default parameters, I don't have to worry about that. So this does provide a flexibility to you that you don't know you needed, but you will grow very much to like the ability to do so.